So far, we've only dealt with the template-driven forms. Next, we'll be looking at the model-driven way, or also known as the reactive way. So we have template-driven, and the model-driven is where we're going to build the data model in the class itself. Right now, in the template-driven way, Angular will roam through the template and build the data model. It will implicitly do it. In the model-driven way, we're going to explicitly tell Angular what the data model should look like. So for the template-driven way, we're going to use the ngForm and ngModel directives directly on our template. The model-driven way is a little bit different. Since we're building everything inside of a class, we're going to use things like the form group, form control, and also form array. Now these three put together will build every form that we need to build. If we look at our current form, we have a name and a username. Let's see how we can use the form group and form control to build out our current form. We're going to use the overall form is going to be a form group. It's a group that will encompass our name, which is a form control, and our username, which is also a form control. The cool thing about the form control is that we can look at it and also get those invalid, valid, touched, untouched, dirty, and pristine, and get those information from this form control. And that's how we're going to determine validation and things like that. We'll have to change a little bit of how we think, since before everything was automatically updated. In the model-driven way, we're going to have to watch for updates to our form and then act on that on our own. To get us started, we're going to put a reactive form or a model-driven form right below this one. Go into Sublime Text, create a new folder called Reactive. And then inside of this reactive folder, we're going to create reactive form.component.ts, and then new relative to that one, we're going to do reactive form.component.html. We won't need a CSS file here. We'll just use the default Bootstrap classes that we have. And here, let's start with import component, the Angular core. Actually, let's bring in onInit as well, since we'll be using that later. Selector will be reactive form, and the template URL is going to be app reactive form.component, and we'll export our class reactive form component, which also implements onInit. And since we're implementing onInit, TypeScript wants us to show that we have an onInit function here. So we'll go ahead and create that. We'll have a constructor and then ng onInit. And this is where we will build our form. So after this component gets instantiated and activated, the form will be built here. Let's go into the HTML and just really simply do I am the reactive form. Go into module. We'll bring in the new reactive form component that we just created. Add that to the declarations. And now we can go into app component TS. And right below this, we'll add a reactive form and use the selector that we just created. Our browser should have restarted, and now we have the reactive form that we created. We have everything working. Let's inspect element to make sure there's no console errors. We are good there. Now let's go ahead and build that form out. Go into reactive form HTML, and really quickly let's do form on ng submit. We'll handle it like we did before. We'll do process form, and we'll do a form group. Inside of that, a label plus an input form control with a name of name, and that looks good. All right, so this is for name, and name. Let's do another one for the username. Label. And for both of these, we'll add the required flag. Let's add the submit button. Let's make this a red one, and that should be good. Call that submit. And really quickly, let's add the process form method that we have here. And we'll console log the word processing. That should be good enough to start our reactive form. Oh, looks like we lost the form control class here. Let's just make sure that this processing works. Oh, required. All right, so we get that console log processing, so we know that our form is correctly wired up to the process form method in the class. Let's go over to the username and add that class form control. All right, so that looks like it's going to be the basis for our reactive form. And we'll notice that the template-driven form way, let's go look at the template-driven form way. There's a lot of information in here that can be cleaned up and kind of convolutes our template a little bit. Right here, we have this ng class. We have the name is required. If we wanted to do multiple types of validation, we would have to add multiple messages here. So if we wanted a minimum length one, we'd have to have a minimum length is required and do that check there. One of the benefits of the reactive form way is that we can clean up our template a little bit so that everything here is done on the model side in the class. We'll be looking at a lot of those things moving forward.